The world of Velarith was beautiful and cruel at the same time. Two suns burned in the violet sky, painting the broken land in shades of gold and crimson. Sharp glass-like rocks rose from the ground like frozen flames, and the air shimmered with heat and static. It was a world that looked alive, but it was dying, burned by war. Sergeant Elias Vance crouched behind a ridge of glowing stone, breathing hard through his cracked helmet. His armor was scorched, the white and gray plates smeared with alien dust and blood. He had been fighting for hours, maybe days. It was hard to tell anymore. Time didn't move the same way on this planet. Every moment stretched thin, like the world itself was holding its breath. Around him, the battlefield burned. Explosions lit the horizon like storms of color: green plasma, blue lightning, golden fire. Alien ships streaked across the sky, their engines screaming in a language of war. The human soldiers had landed here to help their allies, the Lyrith Empire, defend against a rebellion that had turned half their world into ash. But the fight had gone wrong. The Lyrith lines had broken and the human reinforcements were scattered. Elias had lost contact with his squad 3 hours ago. Maybe they were dead. Maybe they'd retreated. He didn't know. He only knew that he was still here, and that he wouldn't leave until it was done. He checked his rifle, fingers trembling. The battery light blinked red, almost empty. His left arm ached where shrapnel had cut through his armor. The wound was deep, but he ignored it. Pain was a familiar friend now. Through the shimmering heat, Elias saw movement. Figures tall, thin, graceful, wearing armor that shimmered like liquid metal. Lyrith soldiers, but something was wrong. They were firing on their own banners. He squinted. Their armor bore the royal crest, a silver flame, but it had been scratched out, replaced by a jagged black mark: rebels. And at the center of the chaos, surrounded by traitors, stood her. He had seen her once before from a distance. The Empress Avaré of the Lyrith, ruler of this crystal world. Her presence was impossible to mistake. Her armor glowed faintly, not from light but from life itself, alive with energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. Her skin shimmered silver blue, her crest of bioluminescent tendrils glowing like a living crown. She was cornered. The rebels circled her, shouting in their strange, melodic tongue. Their voices were sharp, angry, desperate. Elias didn't understand the words, but he didn't need to. He could see what was about to happen. One of the rebels raised a weapon, a spear of condensed antimatter humming with death. The tip glowed black and red, a hole in the world itself. Avaré stood tall, proud, unarmed. Her eyes blazed with defiance, but she was alone. Elias didn't think, he didn't plan. There was no time for that. He moved. His boots slammed against the glass stone as he sprinted forward. The world blurred around him, the sounds, the heat, the pain, all fatting into the single sound of his pounding heart. The air rippled as the antimatter spear launched, a beam of destruction cutting through the space between them. He dove. The blast hit him in the chest, point blank. For a moment there was no sound, no light, only a crushing wave of force that tore through his armor and into his body. His HUD flickered and died. His breath caught in his throat as the shock burned through him. He hit the ground hard, the Empress tumbling beside him, her eyes wide in disbelief. The world came back in flashes. The smell of ozone, the hum of energy weapons, the sight of the rebels freezing in shock, watching the strange off-world soldier who had thrown himself into the path of annihilation. Elias tried to speak, his voice hoarse. "Stay down, Your Majesty." His armor was cracked open, glowing faintly where the antimatter had eaten through it. Pain seared through his body, but he stayed upright, gun raised. The rebels recovered first, shouting in fury. They charged. Elias fired. Short bursts, controlled. Each shot of plasma carved through the glass air, hitting with precision born of desperation. The rebels faltered, then broke ranks as a wave of Royal Guard reinforcements burst through the ridge, Lyrith warriors in shining armor, answering their Empress's distress beacon. The battle ended as suddenly as it began. The traitors fell or fled. The ground smoked with their defeat. Elias staggered, rifle slipping from his hand. The Empress caught him before he hit the ground. Her hands were cool, almost weightless, glowing softly where they touched his scorched armor. "Why?" she whispered, her voice trembling like wind through crystal. He managed a faint smile. "Couldn't let them hit you." His vision blurred. The two suns above him merged into one. He could feel her hands pressing against his chest, light flowing from her fingers trying to heal, but it was too much. The antimatter had burned through flesh and metal alike. "Don't," she began, her voice breaking. "You will not die for me." He wanted to laugh, but his lungs hurt too much. "Too late for that, ma'am." Then the darkness took him. When he awoke later, he would remember only the look on her face, the shock, the sorrow, the fire. But for now, on that blood-stained glass plain beneath the twin suns, a human soldier fell in silence, his body broken, his courage echoing in the hearts of an alien empire that had never known such a thing before. And somewhere deep within the Empress's mind, an ancient law stirred, the one that said when a life is freely given, it must be repaid forever. But Elias Vance did not know that yet. He only knew he had done what humans do best. He had stood between death and another life, and said no. Elias healed slowly. Days passed, then weeks. He learned to walk again, one painful step at a time. The Lyrith healers said it was a miracle that his heart still beat. Human bodies, they whispered, were fragile things made of blood and hope, nothing like the energy-rich forms of the Lyrith. Yet somehow he endured. He spent his days inside the Palace of Light, a place so alive it almost breathed with him. The walls glowed with soft color that pulsed to the rhythm of unseen songs. Gardens floated in midair, their silver leaves singing in the wind. The halls were wide and filled with a light that wasn't sunlight but something older, something gentler. Elias often caught himself starring. The beauty of it was endless, yet it felt empty, somehow perfect but cold. That was how the Lyrith seemed to him too. They were graceful and intelligent, their every move measured and calm. They spoke in voices that sounded like music, and their eyes carried light instead of warmth. They bowed to their Empress with silent devotion, but Elias saw no emotion in their faces. They had forgotten how to feel. Avare visited him often. At first, she came only to check his recovery, standing at a polite distance, her words soft and formal. But as the days turned into nights, the distance began to fade. Sometimes she sat with him in the gardens beneath the twin moons. Sometimes she listened when he talked about Earth, about blue skies, oceans, laughter, and rain. She listened like someone hearing stories from another lifetime. "Your people, they fight, they laugh, they cry so easily," she said once, watching the stars. "We do not do these things, we learn control from birth. Emotion is chaos." Elias smiled faintly. "Sometimes chaos is what keeps us alive." "And sometimes," she murmured, "it destroys us." He looked at her then, not as an empress, but as a woman who had carried too much. Her silver crest dimmed when she was tired, and her eyes held a quiet sadness she never spoke of. "Maybe," he said gently, "you just forgot what it's like to let go." Avare said nothing, but the corner of her mouth curved in the smallest, almost human smile. One morning, Elias walked through the training grounds, his body strong enough to move again. Lyrith guards watched him curiously as he picked up a practice spear. It was light, made of a strange living metal that shifted in his hand. "Your weapons are beautiful," he said, twirling it once. "But they're too balanced, no weight behind the swing." The guards looked at him, puzzled. "Weight?" one asked. "Yeah," Elias said, grinning. "You need something heavy to remind you it's real." They watched as he demonstrated, feet apart, center low, spear angled. Then he lunged, the motion sharp and human. The blow cracked the training dummy clean in half. The guards blinked, startled. Humans, one of them whispered, are small but terrifying. Elias laughed. We prefer impressive. From the balcony above, Avare had been watching. She said nothing, but there was pride in her eyes and something more dangerous than pride. That night, Elias found her standing by the great window of the palace, overlooking the glowing city below. The light from the towers reflected in her silver skin, turning her into something between flame and shadow. He stepped beside her quietly. You're awake late. An empress does not sleep when her world burns, she said softly. Outside, beyond the peace of the capital, rebellion still raged. The loyalists fought to hold the borders, but the war wasn't over. Elias nodded. I heard about the raids. Your people are scared. Fear, she said bitterly, is not an emotion we are taught to show. He turned toward her. Maybe that's the problem. She looked at him sharply. You speak boldly for an off-world soldier. He met her gaze without flinching. Maybe you need someone who does. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled again, slow, genuine. You risked your life for me, Elias Vance, she said. Now you risk my patience. He chuckled. I'll take my chances. Her laugh, soft and real, echoed like crystal chimes through the hall. In the days that followed, the palace began to change. The courtiers whispered that the Empress was different. She spoke with warmth now. She smiled. The light around her even shone brighter. And always beside her was the human soldier with scarred armor and tired eyes. One evening, as the twin suns sank low, they stood together in the garden of glass trees. The leaves glowed faintly around them, their reflections rippling in the pool below. Avare turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. When you stood before that blast, did you not fear death? Elias stared at the water. Of course I did. Then why? He thought for a long moment. Because it wasn't about dying, it was about doing what was right. You were in danger and I could stop it. That's all there was. She frowned. No one acts without reason, not among my kind. He smiled sadly. Then maybe that's what makes us human. Avare studied him, the moonlight glinting in her eyes. You confuse me, Elias Vance. You frighten me. He tilted his head. Why? Because you act with no logic, she said softly. And yet it feels right. The words hung between them, fragile and heavy all at once. Then she stepped closer, close enough for him to see the faint pulse of light beneath her skin, to feel the warmth that wasn't just light, but life. Perhaps, she whispered, the bond between us is not just law. Before he could answer, she turned away, her voice barely audible. Rest well, human. Tomorrow the council will test you. They do not yet trust the one who carries my life. Elias watched her go, his heart beating harder than it should. The air around him shimmered faintly, alive with something he couldn't name. He didn't know if it was love, or loyalty, or the strange gravity of two souls pulled together by fate. All he knew was that the war wasn't over, but for the first time since he'd landed on this alien world, he didn't feel alone. The great hall of Lyrithar shimmered like a frozen sunrise. Columns of crystal light rose to the ceiling, bending into shapes that looked alive. The floor beneath Elias' boots reflected the twin suns through a dome so clear it felt like standing on the edge of heaven itself. He had never seen so many Lyrith gathered in one place. Hundreds of them stood in silent ranks, tall and radiant, their silver-blue skin glowing faintly under the light. Their eyes, bright, cold, and intelligent, followed him as he stepped forward. At the end of the hall, on a throne of living light, sat Empress Avare. Her face was calm, but Elias could see the tension in her hands. Around her, the High Council stood in a half-circle, 7 elder Lyrith draped in dark robes, their crests dimmed to the color of storm clouds. The oldest among them, High Seer Valen, stepped forward. His voice was smooth as glass, but sharp enough to cut. Human Elias Vance, You stand before the council to answer for the bond you have formed with our Empress. Elias blinked. Answer for it, I didn't choose it. The counselor's eyes narrowed. Yet you live within the royal quarters. You train with her guard. You walk beside her as if you were born of our light. Elias stood straight. I'm here because I saved her life, that's all. No, Valen said coldly. That is not all. You carry the Cavthier, the life debt. It binds our Empress to you. It makes her heart and fate your own. Such a thing has never been given to an outsider. The hall murmured. The sound was like wind through crystal, soft but uneasy. Avare rose from her throne, her voice firm and clear. He did not ask for the bond. He did not seek power or favor. He acted from instinct and courage. The fault is mine. I invoked the law. The law, Valen replied, was not made for creatures of flesh and blood. It was made for our kind, those who understand its weight. You risk our stability, Majesty. Elias could see her jaw tighten. For the first time, she looked small against the weight of her own counsel. He stepped forward. If I'm a problem, I'll leave. Avare's eyes snapped to him. You will not. The word struck through the air like thunder. The hall fell silent. She turned to the council. He risked everything for me. Our oldest law demands I repay that life with mine. If you wish to question it, question the foundation of our empire itself. Valen bowed his head slightly, his eyes cold. Then we must test the truth of this bond. If it is only law, it will fade. If it is something else, then perhaps the empire should be afraid. That night the palace was quiet. Elias stood on the balcony outside his chamber, staring at the twin moons. Their light washed over the glass towers, turning them into rivers of silver. He couldn't sleep. The council's words burned in his head. He hadn't wanted this, hadn't asked for titles or debts or destiny. He just wanted to do what was right, but now he was the center of an empire's fear. He heard soft footsteps behind him. Avare stepped into the moonlight, her robe trailing like mist. Her glow was dim tonight. You shouldn't have spoken to them that way, she said quietly. The council does not forgive easily. Elias turned to her. You shouldn't have defended me like that either. You could lose everything. Perhaps, she said, moving closer, but I already lost everything when that spear came for me. My world, my faith in my people. I saw the faces of those I trusted aiming death at my heart. And then you, someone who owed me nothing, threw yourself in the way. She stopped just a few feet away, her voice trembling now. They call you dangerous because they do not understand you, because I do not understand you. Elias looked at her, his voice low. What's there to understand? I'm just a soldier who didn't want to see someone die. No, she whispered. You are more than that. You are something we lost long ago. Her eyes shimmered, not with light but with something deeper. For a moment she looked almost human. He swallowed hard. You think this bond between us is more than law? I do not know, she said. But when I am near you, I feel my heart beat faster. My people do not have words for that. The silence between them stretched, heavy and fragile. The moon shone on her face, softening the sharp lines of her crest. Elias wanted to say something, anything, but every word felt too small. Instead, he reached out, hesitating, and brushed his hand lightly against hers. Her skin was cool, smooth as water. She didn't pull away. Maybe, he said quietly, that's just what it means to be alive. Her breath caught. For a moment, the light around her flared brighter, pulsing with emotion she couldn't hide. Then she stepped back, eyes downcast. Tomorrow, the council begins their test. They will try to break the bond. If they fail, they will fear you more than ever. Elias nodded slowly. Then let them try. You do not understand, Elias. They could destroy you. He smiled faintly, the soldier's calm returning to his eyes. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried. Avare looked at him for a long time, her expression torn between fear and admiration. Then, softly, she said, You are impossible. He chuckled. That's what my old commander said too. For the first time that night, she laughed, a sound like a melody breaking free from stone. Then her smile faded. Sleep, Elias. Whatever happens tomorrow, do not forget who you are. As she turned to leave, he said her name softly, almost reverently. Avaray. She paused. If this bond is tested, he said, I won't let it break, not because of duty, because I choose it. Her glow brightened, warm, living light in the darkness. She looked back at him with eyes full of unspoken things. Then perhaps, she whispered, the universe made a mistake binding us, or maybe it was finally right. And she walked away, leaving Elias standing in the pale light of two moons, his chest heavy with the weight of what tomorrow might bring, and the strange, undeniable truth that somewhere between battle and silence, his heart had already chosen her. Morning came cold and still. The light of the twin suns poured through the high windows of the palace, flooding the hall with gold and violet. Every shadow shimmered, every sound echoed. Elias stood in the center, stripped of armor, wearing only the gray uniform of his fallen unit. Around him, the Council of Lyrith formed a circle of glowing eyes. Empress Avaray stood above them on her throne, her face unreadable. The oldest counselor, Valen, raised his staff. The crystal at its tip pulsed like a heartbeat. Human Elias Vance, he said, his voice carrying like thunder, you stand before the Empire of Light to prove the truth of the Cavthir, the bond you forged with our Empress. We must see if it is real or only a curse of chaos. Elias clenched his fists. You already know what's real. I took that blast for her. Actions, Valen said, can be lies. Only the soul tells truth. He turned to Avaray. If the bond exists, Majesty, it will answer when we call to it. Avaray nodded once, her expression tight. The council began to chant, their voices weaving through the air like threads of glass. The floor beneath Elias lit with ancient runes, patterns of silver light forming a circle around him. The air grew cold. His breath came out in mist. Remain still, Avaray said softly. They are searching your soul. He wanted to trust her, but every instinct screamed danger. Energy crawled across his skin like static, then burrowed deep into his chest. Pain struck like lightning. He gasped, falling to one knee. Images flashed in his mind. His squad, the battlefield, the twin suns burning overhead. Avaray's face the moment he took the blast. Then her voice clear, soft, frightened. Elias, can you hear me? He blinked, looking up. Her lips hadn't moved. The voice was inside him. I hear you, he thought, or maybe whispered. Good, stay calm. The bond is speaking through us. The runes glowed brighter. Valen's eyes narrowed. The link exists, he said, but is it loyalty or corruption? A sudden surge of energy slammed into Elias' chest. His heart stuttered. He bit down a cry as the light pierced through him again, ripping at the connection between them. Avaray gasped, clutching her chest as if struck. Her guards rushed forward, but she raised a trembling hand to stop them. Enough, she shouted. You're hurting him. Valen's voice remained calm. If the bond is real, it cannot break. The light flared, then shattered. Elias collapsed, gasping for air. The runes flickered out. For a long moment, silence filled the hall. Then slowly, the Empress rose from her throne and descended the steps toward him. Her guards moved to stop her, but the look in her eyes froze them where they stood. She knelt beside Elias, her hands glowing faintly as she touched his face. Can you hear me? He coughed, half smiling despite the pain. Still hear, Your Majesty. You fool, she whispered, her voice trembling. You should have let them stop. Wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. A soft laugh escaped her, weak and full of relief. Around them the council watched in silence. The light that had bound them both flickered between their hands, soft, alive, unbroken. Valen bowed his head. The bond endures, we cannot deny it. Avaray looked up, her voice firm again. Then remember this day, Council. A human has proven truth where fear would have ruled. The Kavthir stands. That night the palace was restless. News came from the outer territories. The rebellion had returned. Fleet Command sent word. Enemy ships were descending from the dark side of Velareth, attacking the northern provinces. The war that had quieted for months was awake again. Avaray summoned Elias to the war chamber. The room was circular, its walls alive with holographic maps. Blue lights marked the loyal armies, red burned where the rebels struck. They've surrounded the skyline gates, Avaray said, pointing to the map. If they take that pass, the capital will fall. Elias studied the display, his soldiers' instinct kicking in. Your generals are spreading too thin. They're defending pride, not position. You need to pull back here, he gestured toward the ridge, and hit them where their ships land. The generals stared, offended. You would command us, one hissed. He advises, Avaray said coldly. You will listen. When the counselor protested again, Elias interrupted. I'm not here to command anyone, but I've fought wars before. If you want to save lives, you'll listen. Avaray's gaze never left his. Then you will lead them. Elias blinked. What? You are the flame that stood between me and death, she said. Let that fire burn for my people now. The generals began to object, but Avaray's voice silenced them. The bond makes him part of me. His courage is our shield. His will is mine. The next day the army gathered under the pale suns. The Lyrith soldiers stood in ranks of gleaming armor, their faces calm but uncertain. At the front stood Elias, wearing a new set of hybrid armor, human design fused with Lyrith light. As he looked back toward the palace, he saw her standing there on the balcony, watching him. Her crest glowed with faint blue fire, her hands clasped to her chest. Their eyes met across the distance, and though no words passed between them, the bond stirred, warm and steady. He could feel her heartbeat echo in his chest. He raised his rifle in salute. I'll bring them back, he thought. And I will wait, her voice whispered back. The air filled with the hum of engines as the Lyrith ships lifted into the violet sky, carrying the human soldier who had once been an outsider, now leading an army bound by something far greater than fear. And as the fleet disappeared into the horizon, Avaray whispered to the wind, If he falls again, I will not survive it. The sky burned with violet fire. The twin suns of Velarith rose behind clouds of smoke as the rebel fleet poured down through the upper atmosphere. The air trembled with the thunder of engines. Plasma trails carved lines of fire across the heavens. On the ground below, human and Lyrith soldiers stood together for the first time, not as separate armies, but as one. Their armor shimmered with reflected light, the banners of the Empress snapping in the hot wind. At the front of them all stood Elias Vance. He wore hybrid armor forged by Lyrith artisans, glowing faintly with veins of blue energy that pulsed with his heartbeat. His rifle was human steel, his sidearm Lyrith crystal. The two worlds had shaped him into something new, something neither fully human nor alien, but both. Through the comms his voice was calm. Shields up, eyes open. They're coming through the clouds in 3 waves. Hit the first hard enough, the rest will break. The Lyrith captains nodded, their crystalline eyes reflecting him. For the first time they did not look at him with doubt. They looked at him with belief. High above, the palace towers shimmered in the distance. Empress Avaray stood at the highest window, watching him, her hands pressed to the glass, her crest dim with worry. Don't die again, human, she whispered. The first strike came fast. Enemy ships screamed through the clouds, dropping fire and plasma into the ridge. Elias ducked as the blast shook the earth. The shockwave slammed into his chest, but he pushed forward, shouting orders. Hold your lines, redirect shields to the left flank. Blue light flared as Lyrith energy barriers snapped into place. The ground erupted, sending shards of molten glass into the air. The smell of scorched stone filled the wind. Elias charged forward, leading a squad through the chaos. His armor's voice sensors buzzed with static. He could hear the fear in his soldiers' voices, but also something new: faith. A Lyrith guard beside him fell, his chest pierced by plasma. Without thinking, Elias dragged him behind cover and fired back. His rifle overheated, sparks flying from the barrel. "Get back up," Elias said through gritted teeth. "We're not done yet." The alien looked up at him, blood glowing faintly like liquid light. "You fight like the suns themselves," he whispered. Elias gave a grim smile. "Guess that means I'm doing it right." Hours passed in fire and fury. The battle raged from ridge to valley. The rebels came in endless waves, armored in black and silver, driven by hate. Elias moved through them like a storm. His armor cracked, his rifle burned, but he kept fighting. Every time he fell, he rose again. And somewhere far away, in the safety of her palace, Avare felt everything. Through the Cavthier, the life bond, every pulse of his heart echoed in her own chest. Every flash of pain rippled through her veins like lightning. She clutched at her throne, her guards watching helplessly as she doubled over in agony. "Majesty," one cried. "He's hurt," she gasped. "He bleeds." Her counselors begged her to rest, to let the war take its course, but she couldn't. The bond between them wasn't just law anymore. It was something alive, something she could no longer hide behind words like duty or tradition. "Prepare my ship," she said through clenched teeth. "I'm going to him." By dusk, the field was a wasteland of smoke and shattered glassstone. Elias stood at the front line, his armor cracked open, his rifle out of charge. Only a dagger of burning crystal remained in his hand. He could hear the rebels shouting in the distance, their steps closing in. His body screamed for rest, but he refused. He had made a promise to her, to the soldiers who now followed his lead, to himself. He wasn't going to die here. A low hum filled the air. Then a bright shape streaked across the clouds. A ship of light descended, scattering dust and flame. Its wings spread wide like wings of glass. When the hatch opened, the Empress of the Lyrith stepped out, her robe torn, her eyes burning brighter than the sun's. The battlefield fell silent. Even the rebels paused. "Avare," Elias breathed, "you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be dying," she shot back, stepping toward him. Her hands rose, glowing with power. A wave of blue light burst from her palms, sweeping across the field. Every wounded soldier, human and Lyrith alike, felt warmth flood through their bodies. Wounds closed, pain faded. The rebels stumbled back, blinded by her radiance. Elias watched her, awe filling his chest. "You can't." "You taught me something human," she said, her voice trembling. "That strength isn't cold, it isn't order, it's love." She turned toward the enemy and raised both hands. "You fight for fear," she shouted, her voice echoing across the valley. "I fight for the one who taught me to feel again." A shockwave burst outward. The rebels' ships faltered in midair, their weapons shattering under the force of her will. The battlefield lit up with her power, blue light burning against the purple sky. When the light faded, the rebels were gone, retreated or fallen. Silence returned, broken only by the whisper of the wind. Avare sank to her knees, pale and shaking. Elias caught her before she fell. "You use too much," he said, voice cracking. "You can't." "I can," she whispered, resting her forehead against his chest. "You are my bond, Elias Vance, my heart, my reason." He held her close, his arms trembling. For a long time neither spoke. The world was quiet. The suns dipped low, turning the sky into gold. When she looked up again, her eyes shimmered like living stars. "When the council bound us," she said softly, "I thought it was duty. Now I know it was destiny." He smiled faintly. "Then I guess destiny picked the right fool." She laughed weakly, the sound breaking through the smoke. Together they stood, watching the battlefield that had nearly taken them both. Around them, the surviving soldiers bowed in silence. The story of that day would echo across Velarith for generations. The day an Empress and a human fought side by side, bound not by law, but by something stronger than fear. Something the Lyrith had almost forgotten. Something called love. Peace returned slowly to Velarith. The twin suns rose over a world reborn, their light spilling across the crystal plains that had once burned with war. The air no longer smelled of smoke and plasma. The sky, once filled with ships and fire, was calm again, soft, endless, alive. But even in peace, scars remained. Towers had fallen, cities lay cracked like glass, and the songs of mourning filled the nights. Yet wherever those songs were sung, one name echoed through them: Elias Vance, the human soldier who had taken the blow meant for an empress and changed the fate of a galaxy. Elias awoke to the sound of soft rain. He lay in the healing chambers of the palace, the light dim and gentle. The walls pulsed with slow color, matching his heartbeat. His chest ached, his body weak, but he was alive. When he opened his eyes, she was there. Empress Avaray sat beside his bed, her hands folded, her silver skin glistening faintly under the soft glow. Her crest dimmed when she was tired, and now it was almost still, but her eyes were bright. "You came back," she whispered. He tried to smile, "Not sure I went anywhere." She let out a shaky breath that sounded like laughter and sorrow at once. "You nearly did, again." Elias stared at her, his throat tight. "You shouldn't have come to the battlefield." "And you shouldn't have stood in front of that blast," she said, voice trembling. "Yet we did both. That is what binds us, isn't it?" He reached for her hand. Her skin was cool, the light beneath it soft as moonlight. "Guess neither of us knows when to quit." For a long time they just sat there, their hands joined in silence. Outside, the rain fell against the glass walls, glowing as it touched the palace's light. Days passed. Elias recovered again, slower this time but surrounded by care. The Lyrith healers treated him like something sacred. The soldiers saluted when he walked by, their heads bowed not out of duty but respect. The title followed him wherever he went, the flame among stars. It started as a whisper among the troops, then spread through the cities, and finally across the entire empire. The story of the human who stood against death, who burned brighter than any light they had known, became legend. But to Avaray, he was still just Elias, the man who made her laugh, who argued with her over tactics, who had shown her what it meant to feel alive. One night they stood together on the balcony overlooking the city. The moons hung low, the air filled with soft music drifting from below. The people were celebrating the end of war, the return of peace. Avaray watched the lights below and spoke quietly. "The council asked me to announce a new era. They want to name this the Age of Light." Elias leaned against the railing. "Sounds fancy." "It sounds hollow," she said. "Light means nothing if it does not warm." He looked at her, seeing the sadness behind her calm. "You changed that. You gave them something real." "No," she said softly, "you did." She turned to him then, her eyes luminous in the starlight. "You made my people remember what compassion feels like, what love costs, what it means to fight for something more than victory." Elias shook his head. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," she said, "only a human would have done what you did." Her hand brushed his chest, just above the scar where the antimatter blast had struck. Her touch glowed faintly against his skin. "That day you gave me your life," she whispered. "Since then I have lived only to give it back." He swallowed hard, his voice low. "You already did. You gave me a reason to stay." Their eyes met, and for the first time she smiled without hesitation. In the months that followed, the Kavthir law changed. By decree of Empress Avaray, it was no longer a burden of repayment but a vow of choice. No life would be bound by law, only by love. The council, once proud and cold, bowed their heads in silence when the new decree was spoken. And though some whispered of breaking tradition, none dared to challenge her, for they had seen the bond with their own eyes, glowing like a star that refused to die. The Empress no longer ruled with distance. She walked among her people, listened to their grief, and spoke to them not as a goddess but as one of them. Beside her walked Elias, no longer a stranger but her shield, her advisor, and her heart. One morning, as dawn rose over the violet horizon, Avare stood on the palace balcony. Elias joined her, his armor gone, his uniform worn and simple. The suns painted everything in gold. "They'll write songs about you," he said quietly. She looked up at him. "About us, perhaps." He chuckled. "I don't sing." "Then let me sing for you," she whispered. And in her people's ancient tongue she began to hum, a song that had not been heard in thousands of years, a song of warmth, of sacrifice, of life given freely. The sound filled the air like wind through glass, rising higher and higher until the world itself seemed to listen. When the last note faded, she turned to him, her voice trembling. "Do you regret it, Elias, saving me that day?" He smiled softly, "Not for a second." She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Then neither do I." Years later, the story spread beyond Velareth, across the stars and into human space. Tales of the human flame and the silver Empress became legend in both worlds. Some said he became immortal through the bond. Others said he simply burned too bright to die. But the truth was simpler. He lived, he loved, and he changed the hearts of a people who had forgotten how to feel. And when the twin suns rose each morning over the Palace of Light, two silhouettes could be seen on the highest balcony, one glowing silver, one standing tall and scarred. Together they watched the dawn, hand in hand, the bond between them shining brighter than any sun. Because sometimes, a single act of courage does more than save a life. It saves a world.